Join ForumIAS Academy, trusted by hundreds of toppers, including IAS Rank 1 𝐂𝐡𝐚𝐬𝐫𝐢𝐻𝐵.
Hello and welcome to ForumIAS. Today we are going to discuss the following articles and the date is 4th August 2023. Let us move to the first article. The first article is about government placing restrictions on import of laptops in order to give impetus to the domestic industry. Laptops, tablets, all-in-one and small factor personal computers, they require licenses now. The importers need to have licenses in order to import these products. Why this is happening is because of this graph. If you see in financial year 2022 and 23, which means in 2021 to 22 and 2022 to 23, in these two financial years, India imported $9,446 million worth of laptops from China. Even the second place, that is Hong Kong, is far from the first place holder, that is China. Right? So, in order to give impetus to the domestic industry, this decision has been taken. Will it affect the prices for the end consumers? That is one consideration we need to look into. But if we purchase laptops, whether in brick and mortar stores or online, generally these electronic goods such as laptops are sold at lower rates than the MRP. So, even if it becomes costly, it will be marginally costlier, it won't cross the MRP. So, that is the rationale behind the center doing this, because even if the prices are getting hiked to a good extent, it won't cross the MRP. So it is a temporary shock for the consumers. Nevertheless, let us hope that the domestic industry would play catch up. So that is it for this article. There is not much to see. It is just to highlight what is the trend in the Indian export-import scenario. The next article is about age of consent. Why is this in news? Because recently the Bombay High Court opined that it is high time India considered reducing the age of consent for sex. So why this is in news? It is because recently a man appealed his 10-year sentence for maintaining consensual sexual relationship with a minor. So what happened? This man was sentenced to 10-year imprisonment, but now he is appealing because what is the constitutional validity of this particular notion? Right? The man had consensual relationship. There was no exploitation. Hence, he is appealing. And in this context, Bombay High Court has said that India needs to consider revising the age of consent. Okay? So, the Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act, that is the POCSO Act. So, the POCSO Act, it defines children to be anybody under the age of 18. Okay, so what happens in many cases these days, people under 18, that is teenagers, are also sexually active. If we apply this POCSO Act, it might also lead to adolescents being prosecuted for consensual relationship with minor girls. If there are two minor children, that is one is of 17 years, another is of 16 years, they are in a relationship and they are engaging in consensual sexual activity. In that case, if we are applying POCSO Act, what will happen is that the boy in the relationship, he will be prosecuted. So this needs to be rethought in Indian context. That is what it means to this article. We will discuss the pros and cons, what are the challenges, what are the considerations with respect to the age of consent. Firstly, what do you mean by the ability to give consent? At what age a person has enough bodily autonomy and enough cognitive ability to understand what engaging in a sexual activity means, and what is their capacity to understand the implications, and how do they process that, and how do they give consent? That needs to be discussed. So one is consent, another one is autonomy. At what age do I have autonomy over my body? At what age can I understand what are the changes happening to my body, and I am cognizant of the changes, and I am understanding of the implications of engaging in a consensual sexual activity. So, how to define autonomy? That is a challenge, and we have to consider various things like cognitive capacity, psychosocial maturity, emotional development. All these things have to be taken into consideration in order to define consent. They should have the thinking power to understand. They should have the psychosocial maturity. That means they must be psychologically mature. They must also understand the social context, and they should have enough emotional development to understand this. So then only they will be able to give consent. This is with respect to teenagers especially. Okay. So a child up to the age of 18 years, they should be entitled to right. And most important of the right to that child is to be protected from harm. But then today's children have evolving capacities. One hand, we have to protect them from any harm. On another hand, we also need to understand the evolving capacities, and the age of consent also should be rethought in this context, in the context of the evolving capacities of the teenagers. And also, whenever there is a case which can be registered under POCSO. If someone comes across, if a school counselor comes across such a case, they have to report it. So, in that case, immediately the police will step in. So, what happens is there is a gap between the intervention that is needed for that teenager. You can't help that adolescent because immediately the police will step in. What kind of psychological, what kind of mental, social support they would need, that part gets missed because immediate reporting. This procedural aspects also should be rethought. And also, anything is reported. Everything is registered as a crime if it involves a minor under the age of 18. So, we don't have this differentiation of consensual sexual activity and non-consensual sexual activity. So we can't really study the trends with respect to what is happening. How much of it is happening with the cognitive consent? How much of it is exploitation? We don't even have any data on this. So we can't take a decision. The government can't take a decision on this without having the background data, right? The next aspect is what happens when a report is made. When a report is made, the interviews with the boy and girl should not be carried out by the police. Actually, a social worker or a support person, they should be the first line of contact. We have provisions for social worker or a support person coming into this. But the problem is that only after the case is registered, only after the police take over, then only these services are provided. Instead, what we need to do, what can be a proper procedure to avoid frivolous litigation or frivolous cases in consensual activities especially, is first the interview should be done by a social worker or a support person. Okay, so even in law there is provision, there is a special juvenile police unit, and in that there have to be 2 social workers. Okay, so the social worker, they should be brought in to interview and interact with a child or adolescent and understand the context of what has happened, whether it is consensual or not, and ascertain whether this child wants to pursue a complaint or not, right? Whether there has been consensual sexual activity and whether that consensual intimacy was exploitative or non-exploitative. These are the factors need to be ascertained before filing an FIR. Otherwise, what happens is an FIR is filed without ascertaining and the child turns into a hostile witness in the court. So, entire legal process is wasted in this case if it was a consensual case. Instead, if we also bring some procedural changes, that would also help a long way in recognizing the bodily autonomy and also saving the integrity of the legal procedure. Okay, an age of consent should be context sensitive. That is, we have to look at it in terms of capacity. So, what is the capacity of a person to understand? What is the capacity of a person to engage in such an activity? Right? So, based on that capacity, we can determine age. But different capacities for different kinds of activities, for different kinds of circumstances, might help us have an understanding of consent which is more reflective of the developing capacities of adolescents. So, even sex itself is not a single monolithic thing. It has many shades of it, many activities within it, and different activities require different kinds of maturity. Different activities are carried out in a different context, right? So I hope you understand what I mean here. Different activities are carried out in different contexts, and to understand these different activities and to understand the implications they have, different capacities are needed. These things also need to be explored, especially when we are dealing with teenagers, where the victim and the accused both are minors. In that case, how the law will play out. So, these and all require a lot of research before being made into a law, right? One thing that can be taken is, before the POCSO Act came in, according to the Indian Penal Code, the age of consent was 16 years. Today, depending upon the research, to the extent in which the teenagers are engaging in these activities, the government can probably consider going by the IPC, right? And the amendment can be brought into the POCSO Act. So, there should be a fluid understanding of what it means by age of consent, right? I already told that even the sexual intimacy or activity is not a monolith. It is a spectrum. It has varying activities with different capacities. So, age of consent also has to be understood with fluidity. Okay. So, whatever may be the case, whether the age of consent is lowered or remains the same, what we should focus on is that we should be providing reproductive and sexual health services and access to those services for adolescents also. So, this will ensure that their bodily autonomy is also maintained and they are also not going into the harm's way. So, in this context, what can be a way forward? What can be the legal remedy here, right? So, we need more and better information on what kind of sexual practices adolescents are engaging in, at what ages, what is the level of understanding they have, what is the depth to which they are going. All these has to be documented. There has to be data points, right? And there also has to be understanding about the social norms around sex and sexuality. These norms dictate whether or not they have sex. What is their attitude towards sex? That also has to be studied. Then only a law that is being made will be socially relevant, right? So if we understand what kind of sexual practices these adolescents are engaging in, we can categorize activities to be non-harmful, non-wrongful, and also we can recognize what entails grooming, what is exploitation. First, we need to have the data point on this. Then we can recognize what is the right and what is the wrong. Then we have to understand the social context. Based on all these factors only, a law can be made. Then only that law will be socially relevant and it will be sensitive also. Alright, okay. Now we'll move to the next article. The next article is about the biodiversity bill. It is facing opposition. Why is it facing opposition? We'll see now. So, the bill exempts codified traditional knowledge from benefit sharing. So, what is this benefit sharing? First, I'll explain that. Let us assume there is an exotic herb somewhere in the mountains of Western Ghats, and only a particular tribe knows about this herb. But through research, a company discovers the medicinal property of this herb, but that has been a knowledge of this tribe. Now, if this particular herb is being exploited by that company, the tribe who were engaging in traditional medicine, tribal medicine, they are denied the benefits. What has been common knowledge for them has been patented by this company. So the company will be unilaterally getting all the benefits. So what happens that in these cases, many a times the company will take the help of a tribe. One of the tribal person, they will also consult the tribal person. Through that only they will know the medicinal property of the herb, which has been the traditional knowledge of this tribe, right? What the company is doing is they are merely documenting it and they are providing supporting evidence and they patent it. None of it is contextually important for the tribe because they have been living in that area and they have been using this herb. If it is patented, the company only will be able to use that herb. Then the tribe are denied the rights, and more often they are exploited because the knowledge itself has been obtained from that tribe. In order to prevent this, in order to remedy this, the concept of benefit sharing came into picture, and this benefit sharing has been codified in the biodiversity bill. So whenever a company comes and takes these herbs for producing any medicine, for example, let us take ashwagandha, they have to provide some portion of their revenue or profit to that tribe so that there is equitable distribution of any benefits that are arising from the exploitation of that biological resource. Okay, but what is the problem here? It is because this new bill, it exempts codified traditional knowledge and the Ayush industry from benefit sharing, denying local communities benefits from accessing biological resources. Let us say there is a company which is manufacturing Ayurvedic drugs. Okay, so they will be taking some exotic herb and they will be making that Ayurvedic drug. This particular amendment says that the Ayurvedic company, that is whoever is engaged in the Ayush industry, they need not share the benefit. If it is allopathy, they need to share. But if it is Ayush industry, then they need not share. Now, it can lead to exploitation. The bill says that if it is a codified traditional knowledge, for example, in Ayurveda, there are palm scripts in which this is codified, but then it is very fluid. It can be forged also, right? So this might lead to exploitation of loophole, and the local tribes, the local people, traditional users, they might be harmed. They might be denied any monetary benefit, right? That is what the article also says. The term codified traditional knowledge lacks a clear definition and it will lead to a potential exploitation. And also this particular bill, it decriminalizes some offences, which means there will be only monetary penalties. So it is easy to throw money in that case. It has become decriminalized, and there is only a civil penalty, that to a monetary penalty. So this is amounting to dilution of the law. But we have to understand how far this act has been implemented. What is the implementation level, right? So the Center for Science and Environment, they conducted an investigation in 2022. Okay, so there was no data available on money received from companies and traders for access and benefit sharing. And even in cases where money was collected, the same wasn't shared with the local communities. So, firstly, they are not collecting money. There is no data available on that. Even if they are collecting money, that money is not even shared with the local communities. Such is the dismal status of implementation of this act. And if we are bringing in Ayush in this context, what will happen? There will be more exploitation. Even a pharma company, they can market that drug to be an Ayush drug, and they can utilize this provision and they can escape from benefit sharing, right? So there are numerous ways of this provision being exploited. Also, a 2016 study showed that there were many difficulties that cropped up in many states when it came to implementing the provisions of the Act, especially related to access and benefit sharing. This access and benefit sharing, it is codified through Nagoya Protocol. Nagoya Protocol. So this Nagoya Protocol talks about access and benefit sharing, and that only has been codified in our biodiversity bill. Now this new amendment is diluting access and benefit sharing when it is already not being properly implemented. This Nagoya Protocol, it is under Convention on Biological Diversity, CBD. Okay, let us move on to the next article. The next article is about the captive breeding of the endangered Himalayan vulture. Okay, so vultures in India, they are in a threatened state because of antibiotics. Why is it so? Generally, the vultures, they feast on dead bodies, especially dead cattle. These days, in dairy farming, in order to combat diseases that are happening for cows and buffaloes, the antibiotic like diclofenac are given to the cattle. Okay, so when this cattle dies, this diclofenac is in the system of this cattle, and this diclofenac, it is poisonous for the vulture. That is why vulture population is declining. Today, it is industrial level of dairy farming. Even the small farmers are using all these antibiotics. That is why there is a decline in the vulture population. And government is also undertaking many measures to conserve vulture. So this vulture that is shown here, it is the Himalayan vulture, Gyps himalayensis. And this has been bred in captivity in Assam State Zoo in Guwahati. This particular species of Himalayan vulture, it is near threatened. It is near threatened in the IUCN Red List. Okay. So generally this Himalayan vulture, they live in the Himalayan mountains, and only during winter they migrate to the Indian plains. So that is the activity of this. Why this is requiring a news article? What is so special about this? This is because breeding of such a kind of vulture, a Himalayan vulture, is difficult. Firstly, Guwahati, it is not in Himalayas, it is in the northeastern region, which belongs to the Sundaland biogeographic zone, which is different from the Himalayan biogeographic zone. Okay, so in nature, this species breeds in snow-clad mountains. We don't have snow in Guwahati, right? But as these birds were kept in zoo for a long time, they acclimatized to the tropical environment. We know that in Northeast, especially in the states of Goa, Assam, Meghalaya, Tripura, etc., we have tropical forests. But this Himalayan vulture is acclimatized to snow-clad mountains. So, in such a tropical climate, breeding this was a challenge. Right? That is when the zoo authorities, they came in and they intervened so that they complemented the natural process so that the Himalayan vulture can successfully breed in captivity also. This is the vulture nestling. This is the picture of that vulture nestling which has been bred in captivity in the Assam State Zoo. Okay, so Himalayan vulture is one species of vulture that is found in India. There are also other vultures in India. So there are 4 vulture conservation and breeding centers, and these centers are established by Bombay Natural History Society, not by the government, by the Bombay Natural History Society. So this Bombay Natural History Society, they have vulture conservation and breeding centers in 4 places in India. One is in Haryana. Let me rub this. So, where are the vulture conservation breeding centers located? They are located in Haryana, in MP, Bhopal, in Assam, and West Bengal. So in these 4 states, vulture conservation breeding centers were established by the Bombay Natural History Society, and they are involved in breeding of white-rumped vulture, slender-billed vulture, and the Indian vulture. Okay, so these vultures, these are in the status of critically endangered. This Himalayan vulture is near threatened, but the other vultures, that is the white-rumped vulture, slender-billed vulture, Indian vulture, they are all critically endangered, which require more assistance, more interventions from the environmentalists. So here we have a representation. We have to more concentrate for critically endangered species when it comes to exams. So here we have Oriental white-backed vulture. It is critically endangered. Slender-billed vulture we already saw in that news article, that is critically endangered. Long-billed vulture is also critically endangered. Red-headed vulture is critically endangered. Right? So these are the 4 critically endangered: Oriental white-backed vulture, slender-billed vulture, long-billed vulture, red-headed vulture. Along with that, we have the white-rumped vulture and Indian vulture. So this is wrongly given. It is actually critically endangered. Okay. Apart from this, we have the white-rumped vulture. White-rumped vulture. This white-rumped vulture, this is also critically endangered. Okay, so there might be a confusing question in statement-based questions, especially. They might say that the Himalayan vulture is critically endangered, and they might say that the white-rumped vulture is near threatened. So you have to be aware that there are 4 to 5 vulture species, that is Oriental white-backed vulture, slender-billed vulture, long-billed vulture, red-headed vulture, white-rumped vulture. These are only critically endangered. Okay, and we already know Himalayan vulture is of near threatened status. With this information, with this knowledge, we will be able to understand and answer that question. Okay, next article, it talks about the coup in Niger. So we have to understand the geography part of it, because in 2023 prelims also location based questions were asked. Okay, so Niger is in the West Africa region, roughly speaking, right? So it is a landlocked country. Prime meridian does not pass through Niger. You have to make a note of that. It is in the northern hemisphere. It is above the equator. Okay, so Niger, the capital of Niger is Niamey. Sahara Desert also passes through this country. Lake Chad is at the border of Niger, Nigeria and Chad. Okay, then we have the important river, Niger River, which passes through the country of Niger. And the capital Niamey is also located in the river Niger. Which are all the neighboring countries of Niger? Mali, Burkina Faso, Benin, Nigeria, Chad, Libya, Algeria. They are all neighbors of the country Niger. So this is what you need to know from geography perspective. Now we will discuss some PYQs, that is the previous year questions. Purchasing power parity exchange rates are calculated by comparing the prices of the same basket of goods and services in different countries. This is true. If we take a pen, we will see that what is the cost of this pen in India? What is the cost of the same pen in US? Say, let us take $1. And we'll assume that $1 is equal to 70 rupees. $1 can buy one pen in US, but 70 rupees can probably buy 7 pens in India. So no, this is market determined exchange rate. One pen in US is equal to 7 pens in India. That is purchasing power parity in a simple term. We are comparing the goods instead of going by the market exchange rate. Okay, so the first statement is correct. In terms of PPP dollars, India is the 6th largest economy in the world. This is wrong. In terms of PPP, India is the 3rd largest economy. Which is correct has been asked. A, one only is correct. Next question. Among the agricultural commodities, it is specifically asking agricultural commodities imported by India, which one of the following accounts for the highest imports in terms of value in the last 5 years? So the answer is vegetable oils. We require a lot of palm oil for cooking purposes. Not only in non-agricultural sense, we are importing a lot of crude oil. But the next largest import item is the edible oil, which is the vegetable oil. Either way, we are a country which requires lot of oil. Okay, so that's it for today's discussion. Follow us on all the social media platforms. This is Indumati signing off. Thank you and all the best.